Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. In this video I'm going to give an overview around setting up your game, and I'm going to talk about all the components that you need, and I'm going to talk about what counters go where ready to play. So the first thing you're going to do is pick your scenario, and the game comes with two scenarios. This is the Orna map with the river here and the bridge over the river, and it doesn't matter which scenario you pick. You can either you can play both at the same time, or you can play both individually. But for the sake of argument, I've just set this one up here, and I've made my board. I've printed the map out, and I've mounted it or glued it down to like a thick cardstock. You don't have to do that. I do because I use these for playtesting extensively, as well as making the videos. And I've made all my counters. I've just placed them on the board here just for thematic reasons. Now, I do have a separate video on how I make my counters, but to give an overview, they are actually 20mm MDF type material for miniature wargaming. And I buy a big bag of them. They're not very expensive. And I just cut out the artwork, the counter artwork, and stick them to the bases. You can use card, and I will put a link into my video of where I describe how I actually make my own counters. The other type of counters that I make for the gliders, for example, these are slightly bigger. They're 25mm, and I just mount them to a card, just a normal card, and I black line the edges. Make them look a bit neater. How you make them is entirely your choice, but that's how I make mine. So I've made a load of counters. Now, one of the things that's worth calling out on this particular scenario, and the scenario description gives you full details of this, as to which gliders you're using and which airborne units you're using per scenario. So for this scenario, we're using gliders D, E, and F, and then the corresponding units you can see here. So G, H, I, J, K, L would correspond to D, E, and F. And the scenario explains exactly what units and exactly what gliders you need per scenario. There are 6 airborne units, as you can see, and there are there are potentially 6 airborne units and 3 gliders. And I'll come to that later in this video. And then we've got our bravery counters that I've made over here. So there are a small number of gameplay counters that you'll need to make, as well as the units, both the airborne and the German units. And there are a small number of those. So, for example, we've got our bravery points counters over there, which I'll just move around the camera. There's an example of a bravery unit, bravery counter. Sometimes you don't, I give all the counters that you could possibly need on the counter sheets. It's entirely up to you which ones you use and which ones you don't. You can just take notes and play the game that way if you want. I like to use counters. And yeah, like I said, there's just a small amount of those. So you'll need some PIAC counters, bridge blown up re-rolls, etc. And the disrupted counters as well. Not too many. One thing I probably should just touch on, you will need a turn track. With the turn counter, and the reason you need that is for different phases of the game. In particular, in terms of this video today, we use the turn track to work out the turns for all the glider arrival, which I'll come to in a second. But yeah, it doesn't take too long to make. I can make a board and a scenario, comfortably in less than an hour. I'm saying that I have been making these sort of games for quite some time, so it might take you a bit longer, but in fairness, I do take my time when I make my boards and my counters. So got everything made, and next we're going to have a look at how you get your airborne units ready in terms of the setup. So once you've got your scenario picked and you've got your airborne unit counters here, then we need to determine all the stats for each of those counters. And there is a sheet that you need, just print it out. And on the sheet you have each counter, so this is G, H, I, J, K, L, GHIJKL. And there are 2 sheets, one per scenario. So this is the sheet for this particular scenario. And each counter has 3 attributes, 3 stats: attack, defense, and morale. And in this part of the setup, you're going to give each of those counters, each of those stats, a number. And the number is between 1 and 3. And the way that you do this is that each of the stats can't have the same number. So, for example, I can give this G counter an attack of 3, a defense of 2, and a morale of 1. Each number is different. 3 is better than 1, 3 being the highest you can give, 1 being the lowest. The important thing to remember here is that each stat has to have a different number. You cannot give a unit all of the same number. So, for example, on this H unit here, I'll give that an attack of 1, a defense of 2, and a morale of 3. If I want to, I can give every unit exactly the same stat pattern if I want. So I could give them all 3-2-1, 3-2-1, 3-2-1, 3-2-1 if I want. I don't actually advise to do that, but you can. What you're looking for is a good combination. And the reason for that is that, as you probably can imagine, each of these stats is good at something. So obviously, here with G squad, they've got a high attack value. That means they're going to be good at attacking the enemy positions. They've got a medium defense value, so they're going to be okay at defending when they need to defend the bridge. But the morale is their lowest stat, and you use the morale for a bunch of different things in the game, such as when you go into new zones or trying to disarm the explosives on the bridge, etc. So you're looking for a good combination, and certainly I would advise when you first start playing the game to give that sort of variety. So let's carry on. So this one, for example, I'll give 2, 1, 3. So as you can see there, I've given I've given 3 good combinations, so I could just duplicate that up over these three squads, which I should do. So 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, and then 2, 1, 3 there. So it's a good array of stats for each of the units. Key things to remember, as I've said, the stats, numerics within the unit all have to be different. You can't have, so for example, you cannot have a unit with an attack of 2, a defense of 2, and a morale of 1. You can't do that. It has to be, you have to use the number 3, you have to use the number 2, you have to use the number 1. How you orchestrate them is entirely up to you. And it's one of the decision-making parts of the game, because that has quite significant impact as to how you're going to tackle the objectives that you are given in the scenario. Now next, we're going to put our German infantry counters on the board. And depending on the scenario will give you full instructions where you place them. But as a rule of thumb, we're going to place an infantry counter on any zone where it says enemy and or bridge. So for example, like so. And the scenario will also tell you if there are any re-rolls for those counters. So for example, there's one there, and you simply place those counters on there like that. And that's all there is to it in terms of placing enemy counters. Now you notice we have not put any of our airborne counters on the map yet. And the next phase is to work out the glider landing, where they land, and the turns on which they do. So let's look at that. So in this phase of the setup, we need to determine our glider landing schedule. And each scenario has 3 gliders. So for this particular scenario, it's D, E, and F. And on this chart here, it does tell you which gliders you are using on which scenario. So we're on the River Orne scenario. So we've got D, E, and F. And it also tells you the schedule, or the initial schedule, for the arrival of each glider, and glider D will land on turn number 1. So we can put glider D on turn number 1 over there. Let's just move that turn off there, and E and F should be on turns 2, and I'm just going to move the turns just track so you can see, and then turn number 3. They don't all land at the same time. They came in succession in the actual from the accounts that I've read, and we simulate that in that manner. Now there is a chart that you will be rolling on to determine if there's any adjustment to that schedule. So for example, gliders can get lost, gliders can be delayed, and gliders can arrive as per the turn schedule. However, we only determine that for the second and the third glider. So glider number 1, which in this case is D, will always arrive on turn number 1. But gliders E and F will roll on this chart here, and we'll see if they are late. So for example, let's take E. So we are going to determine in this phase of the setup when glider E lands. Okay, and we roll 2 dice. I've got 2 dice there, and we can sort this chart. Now, if you get 7 to 12, they arrive as per the turn schedule, right? So if we know E should land on turn number 2, so if we get 7 to 12, which is the most common numbers you would be receiving with 2 dice, it'll arrive on schedule, and in turn number 2 it pops. However, if glider E is delayed, so if you get a 3 to 6 result, it lands in the next available slot, and because it can't land in slot 3, because that's when glider F will arrive, then if E is delayed, it will land on turn 4. So then we would move it over to turn 4, and that's determined when that glider will land. So next we determine when glider F will land, and it should land on number 3. But that also can be delayed, and it can arrive on schedule. Hopefully it will arrive on schedule. So if it did, you would end up with, when you play through the game, on turn 1, D would land, turn 2, no more additional gliders would land, turn 3, F, and then turn 4, E, in this example. So it gives some, well, before I talk about that actually, however, it can also be delayed, and it arrives in the next available slot. In this particular example, then it would arrive in slot 5. This is almost like the worst case scenario. Well, apart from them getting lost, you might be having to wait until turn 5 before you can get all of your airborne units out of the gliders. Now, there is another situation that can happen. It's unlikely, but there is on the 2d6 dice roll, if you get a 2, so if you get snake eyes, unfortunately that glider is lost. And on this particular bridge, one of the gliders did get lost, and the game simulates that. So it's unlikely, but it can happen. My last playthrough, glider F got lost, and I had to tackle the mission with only 2 gliders worth of airborne units. If a glider's lost, that's it. It's out of the game. You won't be playing with that glider. So, in my particular occasion, glider E, landed on schedule, but glider F got lost, and I didn't have it. And once you've worked that out, you've pretty much got your game set up. So let's just do a quick recap. So this is what your board should look like with this particular scenario. I've got my glider schedule worked out, and in this particular example, they're all behaving themselves, done a great job, the pilots, and they're all arriving on schedule. I've given all my airborne units the stats that I need to give them before I start. I've placed all the German infantry counters, and sometimes, depending on the scenario, there may be a couple of infantry counters in a particular zone. And this scenario will describe that for you. And I can move that just off the board, but it's just slightly off camera. And that's everything you need to set the game up You will need a pen or pencil, a couple of dice. 3 is useful. You don't need 3, but 2 is perfectly fine. And they don't need to be the same colour or different colours. Entirely up to you what dice you prefer. And you've got everything set up, all ready to go. Now, I do have a series of videos that go into all the mechanics of the game, each phase of the game, and this is just covering the setup. But so, for example, the phase where you're going to land your gliders per turn, there's a separate video for that. Videos on movement, videos on how combat works, how the AI works, how they bring reinforcements, etc. So please do check those out. And thanks a lot for support for the game, and thanks a lot for watching. Thank you.